My daughter-in-law barely glanced up from her phone when she said it. Tomorrow you'll wake up at 3 a.m. and cook Christmas dinner for 40 people. Don't mess it up this time. I smiled politely, nodded like I always did, and just a few hours later, I was boarding a plane to Florida. That's how my story begins. Shocking, isn't it? Some of you are probably wondering why on earth a 65-year-old woman would walk away from her own family on Christmas Eve. Why would I leave behind my son, my grandchildren, and an entire household depending on me? What could push a mother and grandmother to such a drastic choice? Let me introduce myself. My name is Evelyn Carter, and for most of my life, I did what was expected. I married young, I raised my son, and I stood beside my husband until the day cancer stole him from me. When I lost him, I thought I was losing my anchor, but I still believed in the promise of family. My son invited me to move in with him and his wife. I told myself it was a blessing I wouldn't have to live alone, and I could be close to my grandchildren. I sold the home where I had built 35 years of memories and brought everything I had into their household thinking I was securing love and belonging. What I found instead was something very different. Slowly, day after day, I stopped being Evelyn the woman and became Evelyn the unpaid servant. I cooked, I cleaned, I picked up the children, and I stayed behind while they went on vacations. My daughter-in-law, Monica, perfected the art of treating me like hired help who happened to eat at her table. When friends came over, she introduced me not as family, but as the one who helps out around the house. Every smile I forced, every chore I accepted, chipped away at my dignity. So when she ordered me without looking up from her phone to sacrifice my Christmas sleep and feed 40 people, something inside me snapped. I realized it wasn't anger anymore. It was clarity. That night, lying awake in a room that had once held photos of my husband, but now was redecorated to Monica's taste, I knew the truth. I could either continue to let them trample me, or I could take back my life. And that is how a woman like me at 65 ended up choosing freedom by walking away from the very people who thought they owned me. 5 years earlier, my life had looked very different. Back then, I was sitting beside my husband, holding his hand as cancer slowly stole him from me. Frank and I had been married for 35 years. We built our home together, raised our son there, and filled every corner with laughter photographs and the ordinary magic of a shared life. When he passed, I thought the silence of that house would swallow me whole. I couldn't bear the empty rooms, the echo of his voice that no longer answered mine. So when my son David suggested I sell the house and move in with him and Monica, his wife, it seemed like a lifeline. He told me they needed me close, that the grandchildren could use their grandmother, and that together we could all be stronger. I believed him. I sold the only home I had ever truly loved and handed over $180,000, the exact amount needed to pay off their mortgage. In my heart, I thought I was investing in family and security and love. But what I actually bought was 5 years of servitude. At first it was small. Mom, could you pick up the kids after school since you're home? Of course I said yes. Then it became, could you cook dinner? Monica has been busy. Then laundry, then scrubbing bathrooms, then organizing closets. Before long, I was the household manager, the cook, the babysitter, the cleaner, all rolled into one unpaid package. Monica didn't work. She called herself a lifestyle curator, which mostly meant taking pictures of her new handbags and posting them online. While she posed with champagne glasses for Instagram, I stood over a hot stove making meals for 6. While she shopped for clothes, I folded laundry and ironed David's shirts. While she had spa days, I knelt over floors with a mop in my hand. The humiliations came slowly then, all at once. One afternoon, I returned to my room and discovered Monica had redecorated it without so much as asking. The soft quilt Frank and I had chosen together was gone. The framed photographs of our vacations, of our wedding, of him holding our newborn son thrown out, replaced by her idea of minimalism. It looked cluttered, she said with a shrug, as if the memories of my life were trash in her way. At a dinner with her friends, she introduced me as David's mom. She helps out around the house. Not his mother, not the grandmother of her children, just the live-in helper. Later, I overheard her on the phone laughing as she called me the elderly maid. The sting of that label cut deep. I wasn't a person to her. I was labor in exchange for a bed. Worse than the work was the invisibility. I had poured my savings, my energy, my love into this family, yet I was treated as though I owed them for the privilege of existing under their roof. My voice no longer mattered. My opinions were brushed aside. Even my grief for Frank seemed like an inconvenience to her. I kept quiet. I told myself family was complicated, that sacrifice was my duty, that things would get better. But year after year, the weight of disrespect pressed harder, and I felt myself shrinking. I was disappearing inside the very home I had saved for them, and I endured it all until that December evening when Monica, eyes glued to her phone, told me to wake up at 3 in the morning and cook Christmas dinner for 40 people. That was the moment she pushed me past the point of return. That night, after Monica's command still rang in my ears, I sat on the edge of my bed staring at my phone. My hands trembled not from weakness, but from adrenaline. For years I had swallowed disrespect, but something in me snapped open. Almost without thinking, I opened a travel app. My heart pounded as I scrolled through flights, my finger hovering over the Book Now button. When I saw a ticket to Florida leaving at dawn, I clicked it. Just like that, my escape was set in motion. I barely slept. Instead, I packed slowly and deliberately, as if each folded blouse was an act of rebellion. I didn't take much, just enough for a week my favorite sundress Monica had once mocked as too loud a photo of Frank tucked inside a book and a small suitcase I could manage on my own. Before zipping it shut, I sat at the kitchen table in the stillness of midnight and wrote the letter that would change everything. It wasn't cruel, but it was honest. I listed every dollar I had poured into their lives since moving in, nearly $150,000 in groceries, school expenses, repairs, vacations, and everyday bills. I wanted David and Monica to see the cost of my silence written in black and white. At the end, I wrote simply, "I will not cook or clean for this family anymore. I am done serving a household that doesn't respect me. From this moment on, I choose to live for myself. There's sandwich meat in the fridge. You can figure it out." I placed the letter squarely in the center of the counter, propped where they couldn't miss it. For the first time in years, I smiled as I walked away. By 4:30 a.m., I was in a cab heading to the airport. The world outside was dark and quiet, but inside me was a storm of nerves and excitement. I was terrified what would happen when they found my letter. Would David hate me? Would the grandchildren understand? Yet alongside the fear, I felt something exhilarating: freedom. When the plane finally lifted off the ground, I pressed my forehead to the window and watched the city lights fade. My pulse slowed, my chest loosened, and I felt a weight slide off me. When the flight attendant asked if I wanted a drink, I surprised myself by saying, "Champagne, please." The plastic cup of cheap bubbly tasted like victory, and here's where the story tilts in my favor. Remember that $180,000 I gave David and Monica to pay off their mortgage? They always assumed I handed it over as a gift, leaving myself with nothing. But the truth, something Monica never bothered to ask about, was that Frank had taught me to be careful. The money was a documented loan legally tied to their house as collateral. I still had my own nest egg safely invested from the actual sale of our home. So while Monica strutted around believing I was dependent on her charity, she was the one living in a house technically tied to my name. The helpless old woman she dismissed had more power than she ever imagined. As I sipped my champagne and felt the plane climb higher, I couldn't stop smiling. For the first time in years, I wasn't afraid of what came next. I was finally gloriously, untouchably free. While I was lying on a beach chair in Florida, toes buried in warm sand and a spa appointment waiting for me that afternoon, chaos was erupting back home. 40 relatives showed up expecting a grand Christmas feast. Instead, they found an empty kitchen and my letter sitting on the counter. By noon, people were confused, hungry, and whispering behind Monica's back. In the end, they ordered stacks of greasy pizza boxes. Monica, who had dreamed of parading her perfect family on social media, was left humiliated in front of everyone. My phone buzzed nonstop. I ignored it at first until curiosity got the better of me. When I finally picked up, it was David. His voice was sharp with anger. "Mom, what the hell did you do? Do you have any idea what you've put us through?" I stayed calm. "Did you read my letter?" I asked. There was a pause. "Yes," he admitted, his voice softening. "I didn't realize how much you'd contributed. The numbers—" He trailed off, embarrassed. I could hear Monica screeching in the background, demanding he make me return immediately. Later, she called me herself, voice dripping with venom. "If you don't come back and apologize, Evelyn, you won't have a place to live. This is our house, not yours." I laughed, not cruelly, but with the kind of relief that comes from knowing the truth. "Actually, Monica, that mortgage-free house you're living in, it's tied to a loan agreement with my name on it. I can call in that loan any time, so tell me again who owns what." For once, she had no comeback. Just when I thought the situation couldn't twist further, I got a call from a lawyer I didn't recognize. He explained that before Frank died, he had prepared what he called a protection protocol. If I was ever forced to leave my residence due to family coercion or abuse and stayed away for 30 days, a trust would activate. The terms $1 million released in my name and the deed to a beachfront condo Frank had secretly purchased for me. I nearly dropped the phone. Frank had seen this possibility long before I had. He knew I might need a safety net, a way out even from our own son. The condo meant I didn't just have a temporary escape, I had the chance to start over permanently. And then came the most painful twist. David confessed, ashamed that Monica had been scheming behind my back for months. She had quietly consulted lawyers about declaring me incompetent so she could gain power of attorney over my assets. I could have lost everything, my savings, my independence, even my dignity, if I hadn't walked away when I did. For the first time, David broke. His voice cracked as he said, "Mom, I turned you into furniture that happened to cook dinner. I let her make you invisible, and in doing so, I lost you." It was the apology I had been waiting for all these years, bittersweet, but real. A few days later, my granddaughter Lily called me. She whispered into the phone, "Grandma, I know the truth. Mom lied about so many things about money about you. Dad finally sees it too." Hearing her young voice side with me was the balm my heart needed. The grandchildren understood. They saw me even when their parents hadn't. So there I was, lounging by the ocean, sipping fresh lemonade while the life I'd left behind unraveled. It should have made me feel guilty. Instead, I felt vindicated, and for the first time in decades, completely free. I didn't go back. Once I saw the ocean stretching wide and endless, once I breathed air that wasn't heavy with judgment, I knew my old life was over. Florida became my new home, and with it came a freedom I hadn't felt since I was a girl. I made friends who knew me simply as Evelyn, not as someone's mother-in-law, not as a live-in helper, but as a woman with stories to tell. I even opened myself to the possibility of love against something I thought had died with Frank. Meanwhile, David began to change. Without me to lean on, he learned to cook for his children, to manage his home, to take responsibility for his choices. He even started therapy, determined to understand how he had let things spiral so far. And my grandchildren's sweet, loyal souls came to visit me whenever they could. Without Monica's shadow hanging over us, our bond grew deeper, warmer, more honest than ever before. Looking back, I don't regret a single step of my escape. If anything, I wish I had done it sooner. The lesson is simple, though not easy. Setting boundaries is not selfish. It is an act of love for yourself. Family should mean respect and care, not endless sacrifice. And let me tell you, it is never too late to start over. Not at 65, not at 75. For me, the sweetest revenge wasn't ruining Monica's big Christmas. It was rediscovering joy, peace, and dignity on my own terms. Happiness turned out to be the only answer I needed. Thank you for listening to my story. If you've ever faced something similar, I invite you to share in the comments. I promise you, you're not alone. And if this story spoke to you, please like, share, and follow Real Her Stories, so together we can keep shining light on the journeys of women who found their strength.